Welcome to COPENTELL, a podcast about Copenhagen and Denmark's history. Written and produced by Danish historian and tour guide Rune Edberg. This podcast features excerpts from Rune Edberg's book Know Your Dane: Unlocking the Secrets to the Danish Mentality, as well as stories from his 2 walking tours, World War II and Copenhagen, and Copenhagen's Dark History Walk. It is possible to book a spot on these tours on the website COPENTELL.com. On this episode,
how to behave in public in Denmark. Behavior in restaurants and tipping. Danish tourists can often be perceived as obstinate and ill-behaved when visiting restaurants abroad. This may be because Danes are accustomed to the inclusion of gratuity in restaurant prices in Denmark, which means they can often forget to pay the 15% gratuity in other countries. However, you are welcome to give an extra tip in Denmark if you think the waiter has done a good job. Queuing in the supermarket. Even though Danes can be considered anti-authoritarian and anarchistic, there are situations when it is expected that structure and civilized behavior will be maintained. For example, applies to queuing in supermarkets, where it is considered poor form and bad manners to jump ahead of the queue. Even if a new checkout register opens, you are still expected to let those who are in front of you in the queue go first. Behavior on public transportation. The restraint and reserved behavior of Danes is also reflected in public transport. For instance, if you wait for a bus or train, it is generally expected that you wait in a queue before boarding. Additionally, Danes usually seek to avoid eye contact on public transport and prefer to sit in a double seat by themselves on both the bus and the train. Similarly, they do not usually start a conversation with strangers on public transport. Danes generally show submissive behavior in traffic. It is considered aggressive and primitive behavior to speak loudly on your mobile phone. The world's happiest country? Just living is not enough. One must have sunshine, freedom, and a little flour. Quote, Hans Christian Andersen. For several years, the Scandinavian countries have been proclaimed to be the happiest countries in the world. There are many explanations and reasons for this. Researchers from the University of Warwick believe that it is due to genetics, and that the Danish population has a special gene that affects the brain in relation to their mood, thereby making them happier. The researchers behind the experiment mentioned that in their research, they have considered differences in income, cultures, and backgrounds. Another suggestion is the welfare society, which helps cover the basic security needs of individuals and the general public. Others think that it is due to the combination of the popular cultural concepts, law of Jante and Hygge, which focus on not aiming too high but being grateful for what one has and seeking happiness in the small things in life. However, there is also a downside to this happiness. Danes are one of the populations in the world who use the most antidepressants. 250,000 out of a population of 5.8 million have them on prescription.
the gates to the dark history of Copenhagen are open once again. On this walking tour, we will take a journey back in time to some of the most dramatic, tragic, and dark events in the Danish capital's history. In the company of our historian Rune Edberg, we will visit the central locations in the old medieval part of the city centre. From Swedish besieges and British bombardments, to witch burnings and executions, Copenhagen was a much smaller city than today, enclosed and claustrophobic behind high city walls, and with sparse and primitive sanitary conditions, which became a threat to its inhabitants when the plague epidemic hit in 1711, killing 1/3 of Copenhagen's inhabitants. The dark part of Copenhagen's history includes poverty and poor housing, which played its part in the bad living conditions of the majority of the population. Other dramatic stories and events told on this tour include the cholera epidemic of 1853 and the city fires of 1728 and 1795, which have played a central part in shaping the current look and architecture of Copenhagen's city centre. We will also pass some of the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard's old addresses, and the place where the world-famous Danish brewery, Carlsberg, was founded. So, book your spot on the tour now on COPENTELL.com.
Nursing homes. The last stop in the Danish welfare system is the nursing home. In Denmark, there are generally more measures for taking care of the elderly. Subsequently, it is possible for the elderly individual to move into a sheltered residence where there is professional support 24 hours a day. The elderly person whose conditions have deteriorated and who requires constant care. However, they still have the same rights as the elderly living in nursing homes. The elderly person must pay for their stay, their medicine, and their food, but they still receive a pension. Book a spot on COPENTELL's World War II walking tour in Copenhagen. Take a journey back to the 1940s, when the Nazi German forces had occupied the Danish capital. On this guided walking tour we will visit the city district of Vesterbro and the city center of Copenhagen. In the company of our historian Rune Edberg, who is specialized in the Second World War and the German occupation of Denmark 1940 to 1945, you will have the unique opportunity to visit some of the central places of the Danish freedom struggle during the Second World War. You'll become acquainted with the central themes and paradoxes of the period. Danes in the resistance movement and Danes in German service, which came to violent expression through assassinations and bomb attacks that divided the Danish population during the 5 long years from 1940 to 1945. We will stop outside at some of Copenhagen's most central locations and sites from the Second World War. This includes the former Gestapo headquarters at Shellhuset, where we will hear the story of the British bombing of the building on the 21st of March 1945 and its consequences. We will also visit the place where the resistance group Holger Dansk was founded and come past the dreaded addresses from which Hitler's henchmen ruled Denmark with an iron hand. You can book your spot on COPENTELL.com.
You have been listening to COPENTELL, a podcast about Copenhagen and Denmark's history. Written and produced by Danish historian and tour guide Rune Edberg. This podcast features excerpts from Rune Edberg's book Know Your Dane: Unlocking the Secrets to the Danish Mentality, as well as stories from his 2 walking tours, World War II and Copenhagen, and Copenhagen's Dark History Walk. It is possible to book a spot on these tours on the website COPENTELL.com.